Hey guys, I'm back. I'm Shaun. I'm InstInked Comics, and welcome to In My Unprofessional Opinion, the podcast where I review indie comics based on 5 categories: story and concept, writing and dialogue, art and visual storytelling, lettering and readability, and overall execution. And then I kind of throw it all out the window and tell you what I actually think of it. Because sometimes being a professional doesn't mean it's going to be memorable or successful. Sometimes the technical stuff matters less than whether the comic actually makes you feel something, right? So by the end of this, I'm hoping to let you know whether the comic is a page turner or a page burner. And yes, I take notes. And then by the end, you can decide whether or not my opinion matters or not. So, without further ado, let's talk indie comics. This week, I am bringing a new comic. Obviously, each time I come on, it might be more than once a week, but for right now, um, I've got Thelbe Jack #1. Um, and you guys can see the cover. Let's see here, right here. So Thelbe Jack #1, as you can see right here, um, it is a fantasy adventure myth punk comic from Ashevale Comics. So you can see right there where to get it. Um, and it's a 28-page total comic book. And in my opening thoughts on this, I would probably have to say that it looks very busy. I'm a big fan of black and white comic books. Some of the best ones have been black and white. Obviously, The Walking Dead. There's been some Hellboy. There's been just a lot of just monumental comics that really focus a lot on the story. And I think a lot of what black and white comic books do is it forces you to pay more attention to the story. But in my first impression, as I was sifting through the pages there, just like I showed you, it looks very, very busy. I think most pages they have like 8 panels, 6 to 8 panels. So anyway, um, and what really kind of stood out right away too. Let me get into it here. Is the cover actually struck me as being a little bit more simplistic than the interior. Let me just make this big so you guys can see everything here. So there, yeah. You can see that the cover there is quite different than what you're getting on the inside of the book. Now, oftentimes that's not so bad, but for the technical thing right now, I'm gonna say I it should probably matter on the surface level, right? So there are a couple of grammatical errors in the book, so that is something to kind of that did stick out as well. But I've been assured that those grammatical errors moving forward, they're going to have an editor. Very important. But I wanted to point that out right out of the back, right off the bat, just so you guys could be aware. So story and concept, is the idea entertaining? I believe so. I actually did find it kind of interesting. Um, does it feel original or familiar? The pitch didn't give me anything really anticipatory to the book. Um, I was kind of like, okay, it's all right, but it didn't really feel super polished. And of all the things I didn't write down, it was the pitch. And I asked indie comic creators to go ahead and include um, those pitches in the pitch packet when they sign their little release for me to be able to do these. Um, so let's see else. Page turn factor. Did this make me want to turn the page or check my phone? It wasn't boring, but it did somewhat feel a little bit inconsistent. Um, that like from panel to panel, the artwork was fantastic, but it's almost like they're trying to show more movement than what would necessarily be required for a comic book. There's less implied movement and more like actual movement. I think that led to some of the cluttering there. Um, so yeah, so it definitely wasn't boring. There's a lot of action, a lot going on. Um, Favorite story or concept element was basically how the main character got away from the Sun Army in the book. Um, and let me see here if I can actually pull up. Like I said, in my unprofessional opinion, so this is where I'm going to be doing these things. Um, there's not even a pitch in the book. I wish more indie comic books did have their pitches in the book. I wish I was more professional and I knew the pitch right off the bat. So that's a negative mark on me, but I am learning and I'll be doing more of that in the future. Um, so the weakest story or concept, I think for me, technically, is the pacing. It's a little bit kind of back and forth. And I'll get more into that as we go into a lot of like the artwork and stuff like that, because I think the writing and the artwork has to have like a cohesion. And I think this issue maybe was trying to bite off maybe a little bit more than it could chew. But if you're willing to spend the time, it there is payoff. So as for that beginning like story and concept, great story, great concept, a lot going on, so you get a little bit of a mark down from that. So I'm going with 4.5 stars out of 5 for that section. But next up we've got writing and dialogue. So did the dialogue feel natural? Mostly. And the reason why I say mostly is that there's some back and forth between what is currently happening and a flashback sequence, but there's not really too much distinguishing, like I said, with the artwork to make that really stand out. Did each character have a distinct voice? Yes, they did. Did the exposition feel forced? Not at all. On paper, this probably was it written really well, right? So if you take the panels away from it and you look at possibly what the scripting of the comic, um, really really well done. So on the technical, for just focusing on the writing and dialogue, it's really good. Um, One of the best lines that I have that I took out. I like to pick out at least one thing in each book that really stands out. And for me, the line, "Most people don't notice dust, but dust never lies. Neither did our informant." And I thought that was pretty cool. And I'll show you I'll get into it. Let me see if I can find that panel. We'll scroll through here, so you can see like there's really a lot going on. It's not super heavy in dialogue, but the back and forth between stuff is kind of jarring at the very beginning when you're trying to really learn what's going on. But there you go. The panel is, I want to say it was right here. Oh yeah, there it is. We're looking right here. I know you can. I don't know if you can see it, but that's where that. And it's when you get to really kind of kick into Thelbe Jack, right? Um, so let's see what else we got going on here. We'll bring it back. Again, I'm sorry, I'm super unpolished, but I promise with each one I'm going to get better. Was writing easy to follow? Like I said, at times there was some jarring back and forth, especially in the beginning. So like as far as like being clunky or distracting, not on its own. Like I said, the writing, like if you look at probably the way it was scripted, probably really was clear. But with the artwork choices, it became tangled when trying to unload so much information in the first issue. Um, so for that, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Um, as far as notes, I think people are afraid to have an origin issue I think that's somewhat prevalent. It kind of shows in this. I think it could have been broken up. A solid origin story can help really kind of like grip people, introduce you to the storytelling. And for me, like I remember early on, one of the comic books that I actually really enjoyed was not really necessarily a superhero comic book, but it was called Charlemagne. And it was a new character to me, and it had me hooked, even with the origin being in issue one. And that origin issue made me want to get more. And so I think there's a little bit more security that needs to happen in indie comics for some people. Take pride in your character. Introduce people to that main character. Let them sink their teeth into who that is, not just a quick backstory that takes place over the first, I don't know, 5-10 pages, but make the issue about the character. Really dig in, because I think that even like this comic book issue probably would have benefited just even on its own. Issue number one, just the backstory, introduction, closing scene with Thelbe Jack, and introduction as to what, like, where he got his name. So going now into like, can the story be followed visually? So art and visual storytelling, can it be followed visually? It's difficult at times, but it does support the tone of the story, if that makes sense. Show you guys a couple more pages here. So there, like I said, there's kind of a lot going on. And while I'm focusing on art and storytelling, we'll bring that up. Um, Panel clarity was kind of mixed. Like I said in the beginning, with the background, like the flashback elements and stuff like that, there wasn't anything really distinguishing between them that was visually a trigger to let me know that it was a flashback. I had to kind of like sort it out as I was reading through it. Visual weakness, like I said, the flashbacks are indiscernible from the current. You had to decipher it, and it caused some story tingle for me. So it had great art, right? Great art, but mixed with the writing, it did kind of, I did mark it a little bit lower, so I still gave it a 3.5. Standalone writing, scripted, is kind of like a 5 there. Artwork on its own, I would give it probably a 4.5, but we're going to mark it down. I will say too, I forgot to point this out. There is just one panel that for me kind of pulled me out of the book, and it's right here. The third panel here. With having a comic book where the artwork is so strong and it's awesome, to have this overview of this comic, this page, this panel. See if I can zoom in a little bit for you. To not have the security right there to really pull the detail in that over the top viewpoint. I understand they're focusing on the bird and the carriage, but I felt that the lack of detail in it on that panel, when the entirety of the rest of the book artwork is phenomenal, and that just pulled me out. And anytime I'm starting to kind of get into the story and I get pulled out, there's probably going to be a negative mark there. Just basically on the consistency throughout the entire book. I feel like that was a sketch panel. Let's see. Lettering and readability. Was the lettering easy to read? Absolutely. The bubble placement, dialogue placement was excellent. I don't know how to do both in the same. There we go. So we'll bring it back. But yeah, so did the lettering pull me? Did the lettering pull me out at any point? Not at all. So outstanding letterer. They get a 5 out of 5 from me. So superb job on that. So did the comic feel polished? Like I said, mostly. This one panel is the only one that really pulled me out. And then the kind of the tangled um, intro for me with the flashback um, kind of brought me out a little bit. But honestly, this comic does look fantastic. Um, so the pacing was a little uneven. Did the creative elements work together? Mostly, yeah. Did the comic feel rushed? Not exactly rushed, but it did feel like it was trying to unload too much. Issue one could have really been 2 issues, and still have been great. It probably would have leveled up just another point or two based on that. So I did read the comic book a couple times. So the second time through, I was able to pull out a little bit more. So I had to actually slow myself down from the way that the comic book was paced, and then my reading, and then I had to go back and like redigest in order to pull out all the elements. And what really helps is like when I was making these notes, I had those opportunities to really digest the story and really get those other things that were actually happening that I missed the first time around. So overall strengths, great artwork, great story elements, great writing. Just some of it didn't come together in the same way, because that led to the overall weakness. Is that it's a little too packed. It felt rushed through, like when you watch a recap to your favorite series, and it's a bunch of those cuts, and you can kind of tell what's going on, and you're like, okay, I get it. By the end, though, it feels like you're heading for a tone switch. I don't see maybe the next issue picking up and holding the pacing that the first issue has. So overall, for that, I'll give it a 4 out of 5 stars. So final score. Story and concept, 4 out of 5. Writing and dialogue, a 4. Art and visual storytelling, a 3.5. Like I said, for the disconnect in that one panel. Sorry about that. Technical. Um, Lettering and readability, 5 out of 5. Overall execution, we'll give it a 4 out of 5. It levels out right there. So it is still, even with those negatives, even hearing all of that, it's still like a really strong recommendation for anybody that loves, like I was saying, the genre that this comic book takes place in, right? So the fantasy, adventure, myth, punk type of thing. It's super rad. So now for like the important question, right? Forgetting all the technicality of it, forgetting everything else, would I actually spend my money on this? Maybe. Um, and the reason why for me is that personally I think it needed a stronger cover. I feel like the cover should have reflected a lot of the artwork from the interior. I think if it had that level of detail on the cover as it does on the interior, even if it was a black and white cover, I feel like it would be a definite pickup. But the cover, because of what's happening inside the comic book, the cover now strikes me as being too soft. It doesn't strike me as really giving you enough information there. I'm a strong believer that a cover should kind of tell a story, and I don't necessarily feel that it was conveying enough story to really bring it across that way. Um, so reading it, there is enough to keep me interested, but nothing makes me want to shout its praises either. I'm interested to see if issue 2 finds its pacing. With the proper pacing, I can see this being an absolutely amazing comic book that I would subscribe to. Like I said, a lot of information. I see what's going on. I see what they're setting up for with this issue 1. I do absolutely love this comic book, but I do feel like it would have benefited from being broken into maybe 2 issues, so that way it has a little bit of room to breathe, so the reader has some time to adjust to the story. So my final verdict, right? Who would enjoy this comic? Fantasy readers that aren't afraid of taking a chance, and action lovers. There's a lot going on. Like I said, kind of like if I were to equate it to a movie, it feels like Crank, with Jason Statham. There's a lot going on. It's all kind of like jammed together. If you sat through and watched it the first time, you're like, whoa. and you go back and you watch it the second time, just like the second read through of this comic book, and there is absolutely all the elements of something that a fantasy or action uh, lover for comics would actually really get into. Um, what is this comic trying to achieve? It's trying to set the character's backstory and introduce story elements to what feels like a setup for an ongoing series. It does have enough there to give it the feel like it is going to be ongoing. It's not set up to be a short run or anything like that. So if you're going to invest, make sure you invest. I'm reserved to say that I would love to see what happens in issue 2. It does have me peaked enough to see what's going on there, and it has all the potential. One thing I would improve, don't try to put too much into the little pages. Breaking it into 2 issues, lowering maybe some of the panels to let the story breathe a little bit, would have felt like a level up. This is one of those cases where I feel like maybe less is more. So going through, is it a page turner or a page burner? I would definitely, I do think it's a page turner. I really do. I still, like I said, due to the technical score and everything else and my recommendation, all of that put together, it is a page turner. I definitely recommend picking it up, but just know ahead of time that you're in for a lot and be ready to digest, be willing to read it a couple times. And yeah, so that is Thelbe Jack number 1. And again, I will scroll up so you guys can see. We'll go back to where you guys can get it up here at the top. There's that cover. Like I said, the artwork on the cover a little bit different than the interior. But these guys did great. Created by Frank Goodie, written by Frank Goodie, art, colors, and lettering by Slobodan Jovanovic, cover by Noise Art. Excellent. Go to ashevalecomics.com. Pick up an issue for yourself, guys. All in all, fantastic comic book. Excellent comic book. Check it out. Thelbe Jack, number 1. Like I said, it probably felt rough, but honestly, indie comics is not easy. And that is my unprofessional opinion.